Let me show you something worth noticing. There's a moment that comes quietly, without announcement. You're sitting at your desk, or maybe lying in bed at night, and you realize something has shifted. Not in the world, in you. You've been watching yourself wait for years now, and somewhere along the way, the waiting stopped feeling temporary. It started feeling like a strategy. You told yourself you were being careful. You told yourself you were gathering information, waiting for clarity, making sure you understood all the variables before you moved. And those things were true. But underneath them, something else was happening. You were discovering that inaction has a texture that feels surprisingly close to safety. Most people think the dangerous financial decisions are the dramatic ones, the wild speculation, the emotional purchase, the panic sell during a crash, and those can hurt you, certainly. But there's another category of decision that operates differently. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like a decision at all. It feels like wisdom, like prudence, like the responsible thing to do. And by the time you recognize what it actually was, years have passed. I'm talking about the decision to do nothing when nothing was still an option, but barely. The decision to wait just a little longer when waiting had already become waiting too long. This isn't about procrastination in the ordinary sense. It's more specific than that. It's about the moment when caution crosses an invisible line and becomes its own form of recklessness. Here's what makes it so hard to see. When you're young and time is abundant, doing nothing is often genuinely harmless. You can afford to watch and learn. You can afford to be uncertain. The cost of waiting is measured in opportunity, but opportunity keeps showing up. There's always another chance, another entry point, another beginning. Time is doing the work of making your caution look like wisdom. But time is also doing something else. It's teaching you that waiting feels safer than acting. It's training you to associate stillness with intelligence and movement with risk. And that training doesn't come with an expiration date stamped on it. It doesn't automatically update itself when your circumstances change. So you carry it forward into a phase of life where the math has quietly reversed itself. Now you're 40 or 45 or 50, and you're still gathering information. You're still waiting for the right moment, the clear signal, the certainty you've been conditioning yourself to require. Except now when you wait a year, you're not waiting with 30 years of compounding ahead of you. You're waiting with 15 or 12 or 8. The cost of your caution has multiplied silently in the background while the feeling of caution stayed exactly the same. This is where it gets psychologically interesting, because you don't feel like you're making a mistake. You feel like you're being responsible. You're not gambling. You're not being impulsive. You're doing exactly what you've always done, which is to be careful and thoughtful and measured. The problem is that the same behavior that protected you at 25 is now quietly dismantling your future at 50. But it doesn't feel different from the inside. I've watched people do this with retirement accounts they never started, with investment strategies they never implemented, with career moves they never made, with businesses they never launched. And the story is almost always the same. They weren't lazy. They weren't careless. They were waiting for the right time, which is to say, they were waiting for a feeling of certainty that was never going to arrive, because certainty isn't how financial decisions actually work. What they didn't realize, and what most people don't realize until it's too late, is that at some point, waiting stops being a neutral holding pattern and becomes an active choice with its own set of consequences. You are choosing the outcome that comes from doing nothing, and that outcome is often worse than any of the ones that would have come from doing something, even something imperfect, years earlier. Here's the mechanism that makes this so insidious. Doing nothing produces no immediate feedback. When you make an active choice, the world responds. You get information, you see results, you learn whether your thinking was correct or not. But when you choose inaction, nothing happens, which means nothing feels wrong. You can go years without any signal that you're off track, because there is no track. You're just standing still while time moves around you. And because nothing feels wrong, you keep doing it. You keep waiting for more clarity, more certainty, more information. You keep believing that the right moment is coming, that you'll know it when you see it, that your caution is a form of intelligence. Meanwhile, the window's closing, not dramatically, not with any warning, just steadily, month by month, year by year, until one day you look up and realize the options you thought you had are no longer actually available to you. This is what I mean by dangerous. Not dangerous in the sense of losing money on a bad investment. Dangerous in the sense of losing time you can't get back. Losing years of compounding. Losing the flexibility that comes from having decades ahead of you instead of a decade or two. You didn't gamble and lose, you waited and lost. And somehow that feels worse because it was so preventable. Now, the natural question is why? Why do people do this? And I think the answer is that we're wired to treat visible risk as more dangerous than invisible risk. A stock market crash is visible. You can see your account balance drop. You can feel the fear, so you avoid it. But the risk of doing nothing is invisible. It's the risk of what doesn't happen, what doesn't compound, what doesn't grow. And invisible risks don't trigger our threat response the same way visible ones do. There's also something else at work. I think a lot of people are operating under the assumption that they'll have time to correct course later. They think of their financial life as having a long runway, where mistakes can be fixed and delays can be made up for. And when you're in your 20s or 30s, that's largely true. But it stops being true much faster than most people realize. By the time you hit your late 40s, the runway is short. By your mid-50s, it's very short. And if you're still waiting for the perfect moment, you're no longer being cautious. You're being reckless in slow motion. The difficult part is that there's no clear line where caution becomes costly. It's not like there's a specific age or a specific date where waiting switches from smart to stupid. It's gradual. It's personal. It depends on your circumstances, your goals, your resources, which means you have to develop the ability to sense it yourself. You have to become someone who can feel the difference between patience that's strategic and paralysis. That's just fear wearing a disguise. And that's hard because it requires you to question a behavior that has felt like wisdom for most of your life. It requires you to consider the possibility that the thing you've been calling prudence might actually be costing you more than any mistake you were trying to avoid. It requires you to get comfortable with the idea that doing something imperfect now might be vastly better than doing something perfect later, because later might be too late for perfection to matter. I don't think there's a clean answer here. I don't think there's a formula that tells you when caution has gone too far. But I do think there's a question worth asking yourself. Not once, but regularly. The question is this: am I waiting because I need more information? Or am I waiting because waiting feels safer than deciding? If it's the first one, fine, wait. Gather your information. But if it's the second one, you need to understand what you're actually doing. You're not avoiding risk. You're just choosing a different kind of risk. The risk that comes from letting time pass while you stand still. And that risk, quiet as it is, might be the most dangerous one of all. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next.